Delivery to Hell horror story. Trevor Banks had been delivering for Ultraship for 3 years, and he prided himself on his perfect delivery record. Rain, snow, hostile dogs, remote locations. Nothing stopped him from completing his route. But the address that appeared on his scan at 9:47 p.m. on a frigid December evening would test that dedication in ways he never imagined. 666, Perdition Lane. Even the address made Trevor uneasy, but he delivered to plenty of houses with unusual numbers before. What bothered him more was that the address wasn't showing up on his GPS. He'd had to manually input the coordinates from the shipping label, and even then, his phone kept trying to reroute him away from the location. Last delivery of the night, Trevor muttered to himself, turning his van down a narrow road that didn't appear on any map. Just get it done and go home. The package was heavy, about 40 pounds, and unmarked except for the address label. No return address, no company logo, just the coordinates and that unsettling street name. Trevor had learned not to ask questions about what he was delivering. As long as it passed through security screening, it wasn't his problem. The road grew narrow as he drove, branches scraping against his van's sides. His headlights seemed weaker here, barely penetrating the darkness that pressed in from all sides. The GPS showed he was getting closer, but there were no houses visible, no street lights, no signs of civilization at all. Then he saw it. A house, if it could be called that, materialized from the darkness like something from a fever dream. It was massive, Victorian in architecture, but wrong in ways Trevor couldn't immediately articulate. The angles were off, the windows too large and placed asymmetrically, the whole structure seeming to lean slightly in a direction that defied physics. Every window blazed with red light, not the warm glow of normal bulbs, but a deep crimson that pulsed like a heartbeat. The front yard was overgrown with dead vegetation, and in the center of the driveway stood a mailbox with 666 painted in what looked disturbingly like dried blood. "You've got to be kidding me," Trevor said, his hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. His rational mind told him to drive away, to mark the package as undeliverable, to never think about this place again. But Trevor had never failed a delivery. And more importantly, his contract stipulated that refusing to deliver without legitimate cause could result in termination and legal action. He grabbed the package from the back of the van, along with his flashlight and the electronic signature pad. As he approached the house, the temperature seemed to drop with each step. His breath came out in thick clouds, and frost formed on the package's surface despite it being securely wrapped. The front porch was covered in symbols, carved into the wood, painted on the walls, etched into the windows. Trevor didn't recognize them, but they made his eyes hurt to look at, creating after-images that lingered when he looked away. He rang the doorbell, which chimed with a sound like a scream cut short. Nothing happened. Trevor waited, stamping his feet against the cold, trying to ignore the way the red light from the windows seemed to reach for him like fingers. After 2 minutes with no response, Trevor followed protocol and knocked firmly on the door. Ultraship delivery. Package for 666, Perdition Lane. The door swung open before he'd finished knocking, revealing absolute darkness beyond. No person stood there to receive the package. Just an open doorway leading into nothing. "Hello." Trevor called into the darkness. "I have a delivery. I need a signature." A voice answered from the depths of the house. Not one voice but many, overlapping and discordant, speaking in unison. "Bring it inside. Set it on the table. We've been expecting it." Every instinct Trevor possessed screamed at him to run. But he thought about his mortgage, his car payment, his daughter's college fund. He thought about the legal consequences of breach of contract, and against his better judgment, he stepped inside. The interior of the house defied the exterior dimensions. The foyer stretched impossibly far, the ceiling rising to heights that couldn't fit within the structure he'd seen from outside. The red light emanated from no visible source, simply existing in the air itself, pulsing with that steady heartbeat rhythm. And the smell, Trevor had to fight not to gag. It was like rotting meat mixed with sulfur, with an underlying sweetness that made it somehow worse. "Where's the table?" Trevor called out, his voice sounding small and swallowed by the vast space. A doorway appeared to his right. He was certain it hadn't been there a moment ago. Through it, he could see what looked like a dining room. An enormous table stretched across the space, set with plates and silverware for what had to be 50 people, though no one sat at it. At the far end of the table, in the seat of honor, sat something that made Trevor's mind rebel against what his eyes were showing him. It was human-shaped, mostly, but the proportions were wrong. Arms too long, torso too short, head that seemed to shift and change whenever Trevor tried to focus on it directly. It wore a suit that might have been expensive once, but was now tattered and stained, and when it gestured toward the table, Trevor saw that its hands ended not in fingers, but in something that looked like writhing worms. "Put it here," the thing said, its mouth not quite syncing with the words, like a badly dubbed movie. "Put it here and sign the receipt." Trevor's legs moved on their own, carrying him forward despite his desperate desire to flee. He set the package on the table, and immediately it began to breathe. The wrapping paper expanded and contracted, and from inside came sounds, whispering, crying, screaming, all muffled but undeniable. "What's in this?" Trevor demanded, backing away from the pulsing package. The thing at the head of the table smiled, revealing teeth that went back too far, rows and rows of them disappearing into its throat. "A delivery. That's all you need to know. Now sign the receipt. Confirm that you brought it to us. Complete your transaction." Trevor pulled out his electronic pad, but the screen had changed. Instead of the normal delivery confirmation form, it showed a contract written in a language he didn't recognize, with his name already filled in at the bottom. All that was missing was his signature. "This isn't the normal form," Trevor said, his voice shaking. "Sign it," multiple voices said in unison, and now Trevor realized there were others in the room, figures standing in the shadows around the table's perimeter, all watching it with eyes that reflected the red light like animals' eyes caught in headlights. "What happens if I sign this?" The thing laughed, a sound like breaking glass and screaming children. "You complete your delivery. You fulfill your contract. You give us permission to claim what we purchased. And if I don't?" The room grew darker, the red light pulsing faster. The figures around the table stepped forward, and Trevor saw that they weren't human, had never been human. They were amalgamations of flesh and shadow, creatures that existed in forms that made no evolutionary sense, that hurt to perceive. "If you don't sign," the thing said, standing to its full height, which kept growing, its head now brushing the impossible ceiling, "then you fail to complete your delivery. You've broken your contract. And broken contracts have consequences." Trevor understood then. This wasn't just about signing a receipt. This was about choice, about agency, about making a decision that would define what happened next. "Who sent this package?" Trevor asked, stalling for time while his mind raced. "Does it matter? Someone made an arrangement. Someone bartered. Someone sold something they didn't have the right to sell. And now we're collecting." The thing gestured to the breathing package. Inside this are 7 souls. 7 people who made deals they couldn't keep, promises they couldn't honor. Your signature confirmed delivery, validates a contract, and allows us to claim them. 7 souls. 7 people. Trapped in that package, delivered to literal demons or whatever these things were. "I won't sign," Trevor said, his voice gaining strength. "I won't be part of this." The creatures around the table hissed, a sound like steam escaping from vents. The thing at the head of the table leaned down, its face now inches from Trevor's, and Trevor could see that it had no eyes, just holes that went back forever, containing darkness and distance and despair. "You already are part of it," it whispered. "You brought it here. You delivered it. Your van outside has our address in its GPS history. Your company's records show you completed this route. You cannot undo what has been done. You can only choose whether to acknowledge it. Trevor looked at the signature pad in his hand, at that strange contract written in impossible languages. Then he did something that surprised even himself. He threw the pad at the thing's face, grabbed a breathing package, and ran. Behind him, the room erupted in chaos, screaming, roaring, sounds that had no earthly equivalent. The house itself seemed to come alive, walls closing in, doorways appearing and disappearing, the floor tilting at angles that defied gravity. Trevor clutched the package to his chest, feeling it writhe and pulse against him, hearing the muffled voices inside crying for help. He didn't know where he was going, just ran through doorway after doorway, each room more impossible than the last. A kitchen where the appliances were made of bones, a bedroom where the bed was a mouth, a bathroom where the mirrors showed not reflections but alternate realities where he'd made different choices, lived different lives. And always behind him, the creatures pursuing, their forms shifting and changing, sometimes running on the floor, sometimes on the walls or ceiling, gravity having no meaning to them. Trevor burst through a door and found himself back in the foyer. Or was it? This foyer had windows, and through them he could see his van, still parked outside, engine running because he'd never turned it off. He sprinted for the front door, which was now closed. Behind him, the thing from the dining room crashed into the foyer, its body filling the entire space, its knot face twisted in rage. You cannot leave with what is ours. You cannot steal from us. We have rights. We have contracts. Trevor hit the door with his shoulder, and it exploded outward, dumping him onto the frozen front porch. He rolled down the steps, keeping the package protected, and scrambled to his feet. The creatures poured out of the house, but as soon as they crossed the threshold, they began to smoke and writhe. Something about the open air, the world outside their domain, hurt them. They could exist inside the house, but out here they were weakened. Trevor ran to his van, threw the package in the back, and gunned the engine. In his rear-view mirror, he saw the house and the creatures receding. And then, nothing. The road he'd driven down was just a normal country lane, no massive Victorian horror visible anywhere. Trevor drove for 2 hours before he felt safe enough to pull over. He sat in a 24-hour diner parking lot, shaking, trying to process what had happened. Eventually, he called the police. They were skeptical, of course. The address he gave them didn't exist on any map. The GPS coordinates he provided led to empty forest. His company's record showed that he'd logged the delivery as complete, something he absolutely hadn't done, and the tracking information listed the package as successfully received. But the package was still in his van. Trevor opened the back door and found it there, no longer breathing, no longer moving, just a normal cardboard box. He opened it with trembling hands and found 7 glass vials, each containing what looked like wisps of colored smoke. They swirled and moved inside the vials, pressing against the glass as if trying to escape. Trevor took the vials to a priest, the only person he could think of who might understand. Father Mendez listened to his story with surprising gravity, then examined the vials carefully. "These are soul vessels," the priest said finally. "Someone captured these people's essences, likely through dark rituals, and attempted to deliver them to what you encountered. By refusing to complete that delivery, you saved them. But now we face a different problem: how to return these souls to their rightful owners." It took 3 months of investigation, working with Father Mendez and a network of priests who specialize in such matters, but Trevor eventually tracked down the 7 people whose souls had been stolen. They'd all fallen into unexplained comas within days of each other, doctors baffled by their conditions. The ritual to restore the souls was complex and terrifying in its own way, but it worked. One by one, the 7 people woke up with no memory of where they'd been or what had happened to them. Trevor never delivered for Ultraship again. He quit the next day, consequences be damned. Some contracts he'd learned weren't worth honoring. Some deliveries should never be made. But sometimes, late at night, he thinks about that house on Perdition Lane. He thinks about the creatures waiting there, about the thing that had towered over him, about all the other deliveries that had been made over the years by drivers who hadn't questioned, hadn't refused, hadn't run. How many souls had been successfully delivered? How many contracts had been completed? And most terrifying of all, the knowledge that somewhere, someone was still sending packages, still making deliveries, still feeding the hungry darkness that waited at 666 Perdition Lane. The address might not exist on any official map, but evil doesn't need a GPS to find those willing to serve it. Sometimes, Trevor gets phantom delivery notifications on his phone, always at 9:47 p.m., always showing that impossible address. He never accepts them, never will, because he learned the most important lesson that night. Some doors, once opened, can never be fully closed. And some deliveries damn more than just a person who makes them.